I've been having dreams, jumping on a trampoline, flipping in the air. I never land, just float there.
What's up, everybody, and welcome back to the channel. A lot going on this week. Yesterday, Apple announced the MacBook Air, their major revision to that product line. Earlier this month, Microsoft announced the Surface Laptop 2. And if you weren't paying super close attention or had never seen these products before, that intro video might look like just one laptop, but I actually spliced together Apple's and Microsoft commercials, and you can't really tell the difference between their marketing styles these days. They're very, very similar, and clearly they're working too, because they continue to make them videos like that, and the products are selling. And so what we've got here is a Surface Laptop 2, and then we also have the MacBook Air, which I don't have a MacBook Air because it was announced yesterday. It's not even available yet. But what we do have is a spec breakdown of everything. And I think these products are going to be cross-shopped significantly heading into the holiday season. And it's going to be dependent on a very few minor details about which product is probably going to be for you. Obviously, Apple has their lineup and Microsoft has theirs. And these two products are probably going to be considered flagships of the, vanilla laptop market, if you will. And I say vanilla because they're not transforming. They're not, tenting and tableting and all that stuff. They're just your standard run-of-the-mill laptops. And so what we've got here are the MacBook Air starts at $1,200, and Microsoft laptop Surface Laptop 2 starts at $1,000. So Microsoft $200 less than what Apple is currently offering. And so keep that in mind. I'm only comparing the entry level because you can mix and match these things with different specs, and it gets a little convoluted about what you're doing. So I'm starting with just the basics here because I think that's the easiest way to compare these things. Dimension wise, they're relatively similar. The MacBook Air comes in, and this is in inches, 11.97 by 8.36 by 0.61 inches thick at its thickest, and 0.16, I believe, yes, at its thinnest, because it's got that tapered design. So keep that in mind, because the Surface Laptop 2 is 12.13 inches by 8.79 by 0.57 inches thick. Now, what I just told you is that at its thickest part, the Surface Laptop 2 is thinner, but at its thinnest part, the MacBook Air is thinner than the Surface Laptop 2. Does this matter? I don't think so, unless you are like really, really anal about how large these laptops are. I don't think this makes too much of a big difference because they both weigh about the same, 2.75 pounds for the MacBook Air and 2.76 pounds for the Surface Laptop 2. Basically the same. You can't tell the difference there. So on the dimension side, the physical footprint of it, it's close enough that I don't think that either one has like a massive significant advantage. Granted, if you were absolutely, detail oriented and want the thinnest device between the two, MacBook Air is thinner. There's no doubt about it. At its thinnest point, keep that in mind. I don't think that's a big difference. Honestly, the biggest differentiator on these two products come down to a couple things. One, the operating system and the CPU. That's the big deal. Obviously, because the MacBook Air is made by Apple, it's going to run Mac OS. Because the Surface Laptop 2 is made by Microsoft, you guessed it, it's running Windows 10. Now, technically, you can, on the MacBook Air, run Windows 10. So if that is kind of your jam, you can do that with the MacBook Air using Boot Camp. There's nothing that really stops you from doing that. Because, as we all know, they all run Intel chips. Now, this is where things get interesting, because Microsoft is using the traditional, or whatever, easy to understand Intel chips. They're using the 8th gen, which is a quad-core setup. Remember, this is quad-core because this is going to be a differentiator here from Microsoft. And we can actually pull up the specs here, right there. And so what you get here is, we can see that if we scroll down here, so we got the processor, Intel 8th gen, i5 or i7, and then on the MacBook Air side, things get a little bit different. See, they say 1.6 dual-core i5 or turbo boost and all that good stuff. The reason why I say this is interesting is because these specs don't line up to an 8th gen. What these actually are Amber Lake chips in the MacBook Air, which is better, I'm not going to get into Amber Lake versus 8th gen and all that good stuff. This is pretty much a custom chip designed by Apple. Well, I don't know if it's designed by Apple, but made specifically for Apple for this laptop. The big difference here, folks, that you need to understand is that the MacBook Air is only dual core. So you are paying $200 more for a dual core laptop. For $200 less on the Microsoft side, you're getting a quad core chip. Now, you might say, well, you know what, with dual core, you're going to get better battery life and all that good stuff. And maybe that's fine for these devices because they're lower compute. I can buy that argument. But the problem here is when you scroll down to, where's battery? I may have passed it up here. Battery, looking for battery life. So up to 12 hours wireless web. There's not a great comparable benchmark on Microsoft's site, but if you look, 13 hours movie playback. If you come over to Microsoft's side, you get up to 14 hours of video playback. So that argument doesn't hold true very well, that's saying, hey, the dual core is going to give you better battery life, because Microsoft and Apple are both clearly saying 13 hours on the MacBook Air and 14.5 on the Surface Laptop 2. So you're paying more money for a dual core, less battery life with a MacBook Air. Now, technically speaking, you are getting a higher resolution display. If you look at display, you are going to get 227 pixels per inch, 2560 by 1600, and then on the Microsoft side, you get 2256, but basically what you need to know is 201 ppi. So you do get a better display on MacBook Air. If that is your benchmark things, keep that in mind. Now, granted, they do have different aspect ratios here, because you can see 3:2 aspect ratio, I believe Apple, is 16:10. So there is a little bit of a difference there. Keep that in mind. But again, these are minor differences here, and 8 gig of RAM both are doing 128 gigs of storage. Now, the ports are interesting because Microsoft is more of a classic port kind of guy, if you know what I mean, because they've got one full USB here, they've got the headphone jack, they've got a mini display port, and the Surface Connect, which is for charging, and Apple is all in on USB Type-C. And so just keep that in mind. Now, graphics-wise, it's the UHD Graphics 617, and Microsoft has the Graphics 620. It's mostly because it's a newer processor, because the 8th gen stuff was just announced. This is interesting. This is a pure spec look at these products. Now, there's a lot of differing opinions about what you kind of get for the money. Which one is better? That is completely subjective, up to you. I can tell you that the Surface Laptop 2 is a better value from a pure spec performance. There's no doubt about it. Microsoft has more cores. You're going to get better battery life, which is most important. Now, granted, Apple does win on a higher resolution display. There's no argument there. The keyboard is going to be interesting. There's been a lot of flack about Apple's latest iterations of their keyboards. I don't know if these are going to be any different. I'm assuming they're going to have that membrane on there to help make them, a little bit more dust resistant. Microsoft Surface Laptop 2 shouldn't have any issues. It's basically the exact same design as the Surface Laptop. And so when it's coming down to decide what is more important to you, I think it actually just comes down to one thing. If you can live with Windows 10. If the answer is yes, then the Surface Laptop 2 is definitely, I think, the better buy. Just from you're going to get better performance, you're going to get better battery life. If you are in the Mac world, you're going to be stuck with the MacBook Air, but know that you're in traditional Apple fashion. You're going to be paying more and getting less for your money. Honestly, I don't think there's really any other way to describe it. It's hard to make the argument that you're paying that much. You're paying a $200 premium for roughly 20 more pixels per inch, give or take. That's hard to justify, and I don't think you can justify the $200 more because it's slightly thinner in one spot of the device. So that's tough. Now, granted, those are USB Type-C Thunderbolt ports on the MacBook Air. So that is definitely an advantage, because Microsoft is not doing that. That's probably not coming until next year. And you're going to get slightly thinner bezels too. So you're going to get potentially a little bit more modern looking device than the Surface Laptop 2. But if you grab that Surface Laptop 2 in burgundy, you're going to be quite happy with it. So these are some things to keep in mind when you're looking and cross-shopping these devices. It's really going to come down to if you want Mac OS. If you can live with Windows 10, which it's a fine OS. I mean, it's matured very well. It's not perfect, but I don't think anything's perfect at this point. You're going to get a better product with the Surface Laptop 2. But I totally get why people are going to buy that MacBook Air. The challenge for me is that it's $200 more. If the MacBook Air was $1,000, if it was $999, where everyone was kind of hoping and expecting it would be, this would be a much harder argument because Apple's build quality is typically top notch and all that good stuff. And you might be able to justify that dual core versus quad core a little bit easier, but we're not talking about that. The reason why I honestly think it's $1,200 is because they're higher and their larger iPad Pro, the 12.9 inch version is $1,000. And so they didn't want people cross shopping them, I guess. And so, these are just kind of a look at these two products. They are both, candidly, I think you're going to be happy with either one, right? You could buy either one of these products and you're going to be getting a good device. I don't argue that from either company, and you're going to get good customer service from both companies as well. So keep that in mind. The question becomes do you want better performance or not? And honestly, I don't think, I don't want to talk too broadly here, but Apple's user base typically doesn't care too much about the detailed specs, because if they did, Apple would have been out of the market a long time ago. But Apple does a very good job with the fit and finish of all of their products, and they typically work very well and seamlessly together. And so if you're in that ecosystem, I totally understand why you're going to buy that MacBook Air. But if you're willing to dip your toes outside that water, I definitely think a Surface Laptop 2 is where you'd probably want to end up. And yeah, I'll be very curious to see how these things sell coming up in the holiday season. Obviously, both companies are doing pretty well in this space. I think Apple definitely has the advantage. Granted, they are the largest company in the world, although Microsoft's not far behind, at least in terms of stock market value. So there you go, guys. This is the Surface Laptop 2 versus MacBook Air. Just kind of a quick cross comparison of them. I mean, I'd love to know what you guys think. I think a lot of people are going to say, hey, the Surface Laptop 2 is a better spec. It's the better value, and I fully agree. And then there's going to be people who are saying, you know what, Apple just makes great laptops, and that's where I'm going to give my money, because I know that if I give them that money, I'm going to have a good experience. And so I totally understand and respect that. And I'm curious what you guys think. But thanks for tuning in, guys, and we'll catch you right back here next time.